Hello, welcome back to SportsZone. This is Going for Two, our premier NFL segment. I'm joined alongside by Dan Orlich. Dan, obviously lots to talk about this past week, including one of the two remaining undefeated teams falling on the road. That was the Kansas City Chiefs, losing a nail-biter 43-40 in Foxborough to Tom Brady, with the whole band back together in Foxborough, if you will. But what does this say about the Chiefs going forward?
So it's unfortunate that they couldn't win their game, but scoring 40 points in Foxborough, it shows that, yes, they lost, but they're still a very good team, better than last year when they made the playoffs. And I think they could go really far this year. They're a very talented team with plenty of young studs, for lack of a better term, on that team.
Yeah, it still says a lot that Patrick Mahomes and that offense was still able to put up 40 points on the road in Foxborough, something that not many teams are able to do. That is for sure. Now, going to the only undefeated team remaining in the NFL, you had the Los Angeles Rams edging out the Denver Broncos this week, 23-20 in Mile High. What does this say about the Rams this season? Todd Gurley, 208 rushing yards.
Todd Gurley's the best running back, maybe the best player in the NFL. He's insane. It seems like there's nothing he can't do. He can catch, he can run, obviously. And I mean, he carries the only undefeated team in football. I mean, there are other good players on that team, definitely, but he's no doubt the starts. It's not Jared Goff who's winning these games for them. He's been impressive, but nowhere near Todd Gurley's level, and they remain undefeated.
Yeah, and you can't fault that defense as well. Aaron Donald, Marcus Peters, and Ndamukong Suh on the same defense, a very dangerous group on the back end, but they are the only team left at 6-0. Now, going to the game on Thursday night, you had the NFC East, kind of a limping division, if you will, right now. The Eagles beating the Giants, but a silver lining for the New York Giants. Saquon Barkley, the beast himself, 229 yards from scrimmage, 2 touchdowns on 22 touches of the ball. If you're the Giants here, obviously not the season you want with a loss 34-13 to Philly, but is Saquon Barkley the guy you build your team around for the future?
I think he has to be. I know a lot of Giants fans still want Eli Manning to be a big star, and he is, but he's not the future anymore. And yeah, Saquon Barkley has been very impressive. And for the Giants, I mean, there's not really any shame in losing to the defending Super Bowl champions, because they're the defending Super Bowl champions. The Eagles are a really good team. So yeah, I would say for the Giants, you need to build your team around Saquon Barkley. He's an incredibly talented player.
Yeah, and if you go down south to America's team, if you will, the Dallas Cowboys absolutely blowing the doors off the Jacksonville Jaguars, 40-7. That very vaunted defense of the Jaguars giving up 40 points on the road. Jacksonville now 3-3. Dan, what does that mean for Jacksonville, showing that they might not be as consistent as people expected?
Yeah, they were supposed to be a playoff team going into this year. They were a playoff team last year, and they're not playing like a playoff team at all. Absolutely blown out of the water by the Cowboys, who, like you said, are in a limping division. They're not such a good team, and they made Jacksonville look really awful.
Yeah, now looking ahead, we have Week 7 coming up here for the NFL. The biggest matchup of the week, probably the Bengals going into Kansas City. Now Patrick Mahomes has had a loss. How do you think the Chiefs rebound at home?
So Patrick Mahomes has had a loss, but he was still good on Sunday when they played. And so the Bengals are a good team, but I do think that the Chiefs will rebound with a win. I don't think much is going to change for Mahomes, because he still looked very good. But it is important for them to get a win here and to rebound. I think if they don't get a win here, then that's going to cause some long-term issues for the Chiefs.
It should be very interesting to watch on Sunday night, and it should be a very interesting Week 7. But anyway, that's all the time we have for this edition of Going for Two. More SportsZone coming to you after this.
Hi guys, welcome back to Throwing Up Them Hoops. Here I am with Dan. We're both really excited about the new NBA season. Just started last night. First, we're going to talk about that Celtics-Sixers game. What do you think?
Man, the Sixers were trash, which is really sad because I like them. I was rooting for them last postseason, but they really looked awful. The Celtics are a really good team, so they're capable of making other teams look awful, but I wasn't expecting them to make the Sixers look like that, because I generally consider the Sixers lately to be a very good team as well. But the Celtics looked great, and the Sixers just looked totally out of their league.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at Fultz comparing to Tatum. Throughout the season, obviously, there was essentially a swap there in the 2017 NBA draft. So far, it looks like the Celtics have won that. We'll see looking forward. And later that night, we had the Golden State Warriors playing a Westbrook-less Oklahoma City Thunder team, and they only won by 8. Are you surprised by that? Is that a reason for concern?
I was shocked by that. The Thunder with Westbrook aren't the second best team in the West. And for the Warriors to only win by 8, I mean, yeah, it's the very beginning of the season, so I don't think it's that much cause for concern. But it was definitely a far closer game than I was expecting. It's good news for the Thunder to be able to be so competitive without Westbrook, who adds 10, 20 points whenever he's on the field or on the court. So, I mean, for him to be able to not play and for the Thunder to still do well against the best team in basketball it's really good news for them. But it is a bit concerning for the Warriors.
So I'm going to throw it over to tonight's games. We've got the Suns playing the Mavericks. We normally wouldn't talk about either teams, but it's Luka Doncic and DeAndre Ayton, two of the front runners for Rookie of the Year. Do you think either of them are going to win Rookie of the Year, or will it be somebody else?
I think that Doncic has a very good chance of winning Rookie of the Year. I still think the Mavericks are worse than the Suns, and the Suns are going to win tonight. But I do think, at least he's not tested really at an NBA level yet, because preseason games don't really test you to your full extent. But he's a really talented player, and I think if he plays to his potential, he could definitely win Rookie of the Year.
And throwing it over to the matchup of disgruntled players, Jimmy Butler, who's unhappy with the Timberwolves, and DeMar DeRozan, who was unhappy being traded away from Toronto to San Antonio. So the Spurs and the Wolves are playing tonight. What do you think is going to happen? What do you expect from both teams this season?
So I might be slightly biased, but I think the Spurs are going to win. They are my team, but I'm trying to say that without bias. Jimmy Butler's not going to play because he doesn't want to play. The difference between Butler and DeRozan is that, while Butler, like I said, isn't going to play, DeMar DeRozan is coming into the year with a chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove that he shouldn't have been traded. And so I think he really wants to make a statement in San Antonio that he is at least at Kawhi Leonard's level. So I think he's coming in with a chip on his shoulder, and I think that the Spurs are going to win, and I think that while both teams are probably playoff teams, they're both lower tier playoff teams. They're not the Thunder, the Rockets, or the Warriors. So they're both playoff teams is how I see the year going for both of them. Timberwolves need to get Jimmy Butler off their team as quickly as possible, and I think the Spurs win tonight.
Yeah, I agree. I also think DeMar DeRozan's going to have a huge chip on his shoulder to, try to prove the Toronto management wrong, that they were wrong in trading him away. And we'll see what happens throughout the season. So that's it for Throwing Up the Hoops today. We'll be back next week. Hello and welcome to our baseball segment. Right now we're in the heat of the season. We've got only 4 teams left. We've got tonight the LA Dodgers and the Milwaukee Brewers. This could possibly be Clayton Kershaw, an all-time legendary pitcher's last game in LA, as he's dealing with contract negotiations. Who do you think is going to win that series, and do you think Kershaw will leave LA?
Right, so it's an opt-out year for Kershaw. He could accept his player option, but he won't because he's going to make a lot more money on the free agent market. Even if he does go back to LA, we'll get more money out of them. The series, I think, is going to go to the Brewers. I think they're going to lose tonight and then win 2 straight and end up winning the series. It's currently tied 2-2. I think that they're just a slightly better team right now. Throughout the season, I think the Dodgers are probably a better team, but when you look at how hot the Brewers have been, I think it's almost too good of a story for it to end here.
I also agree. I think the Milwaukee Brewers are going to advance and make it into the World Series. So throwing it over to the American League, we've got the Boston Red Sox and the Houston Astros. These are 2 powerhouse teams. Great matchup. Who do you think is going to win that series and why?
So I'm also going to go with a slight underdog here. I think the Astros are going to win. I've said it before. I don't think the Boston's pitching is up to the standard that they needed to be for them to beat the Astros. You saw in Game 1, Chris Sale was struggling to reach, at 93, 94. His velocity is not where he needs it to be, and the Astros exploited that. And I think the defending World Series champions are going to head back to the World Series.
Yeah, Chris Sale had been nursing some injuries over the past few years, maybe affecting his velocity. And now, for the World Series, it looks like you've got the Brewers and the Astros, both mostly considered underdogs in their current series. So who do you think is going to win it all?
I think that the Brewers are going to win it all. It's going to be a pitching versus hitting matchup. The Astros pitching staff is still one of the best in baseball, and the Brewers have shown that they can hit almost anyone. So while I think it'll be a really good series and it'll go 6 or 7 games, I don't see the Astros winning it. And I think if the Brewers can beat the Dodgers, then they can beat the Astros too. And I think that they'll head home with the World Series trophy.
As a Cubs fan, it would be pretty painful to see the team that we lost to in the wild card game win the entire World Series. But I must say, I would feel pretty happy for a franchise that has lost a lot in their history. They've been around for so many years, and it would be interesting to see, another new team that hasn't won in a long time. The past 2 years, the Astros and the Cubs, who haven't won, basically ever, win, and now it could be a third straight year with the Brewers. So that's it for our baseball segment, and we'll be back next week to talk about the World Series.
Welcome back to SportsZone. This is the college football segment. I'm joined alongside by Dan Roth. Dan, a huge Week 7, might even be considered one of the biggest Week 7s of all time in college football. 4 top 10 losses in the same week. We're going to start with the biggest one, Georgia losing to LSU in Death Valley. So now Georgia obviously dropping in the rankings, dropping to, I believe, number 8 or 9. Dan, what does this mean for LSU, however?
I think LSU honestly thinks that they can compete with Bama right now. Obviously, everybody around the country still probably doesn't think so. Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback for Alabama, has a sprained knee that he's nursing. So LSU at home in Death Valley, one of the best crowds in all of college football, is hosting Bama a few weeks from now. That is going to be the game of the year and is really going to tell me if LSU is back.
That's a hot take, especially with LSU stumbling earlier this year to Florida. In Florida, it'll be very interesting to see Coach O's Tigers, now number 5 in the nation, but now going to probably one of the more surprising upsets, if you will, the West Virginia Mountaineers losing to Iowa State in Ames. What happened for West Virginia?
To be honest, another place, Iowa State, that is an underrated crowd right there. We've seen a lot of upsets in that building. I remember way back in 2011, Oklahoma State was ranked number 2 in the nation, I think. They lost in overtime there. Complete shocker. This is another shocker because Will Grier is a top 3 quarterback in all of football for West Virginia. He struggled a bit. We haven't really seen him struggle much all year. And this is really going to dent their chances of making the college football playoffs. They were the last remaining unbeaten team in the whole entire Big 12. And now with the loss, they still have to play Texas and Oklahoma. It's just going to be tough for West Virginia to, make the playoffs now.
Yeah, the Big 12 already with pretty non-so-favorable, if you will, reputation with the selection committee. West Virginia seeming to be the final hope. But as you mentioned, I also don't think a Big 12 will make the playoff this year. Going out into the Big 10, you had Penn State taking on Michigan State at home and dropping a nail-biter to Michigan State, 21-17. Penn State falling substantially in the AP rankings. Has that ended Penn State's season with the loss to Michigan State?
I don't think it's ended their season because I think if they win out, they could still, make the Rose Bowl, which is, as an at-large out of the Big 10, assuming Ohio State makes the playoffs, there's going to be a spot for a Big 10 team. So I'm not saying the season's over. I mean, it's over in terms of winning the championship, But winning the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all, is definitely something that anybody would be proud of, especially after they lost that nail-biter against USC 2 years ago in that bowl. And this is deja vu for me because last year Penn State was ranked high. They lost a nail-biter against Ohio State and Michigan State, and it just happened again this year.
However, this year, not so easy. The Rose Bowl, a playoff bowl this year, as well as the Sugar Bowl. The Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl are the playoff bowls this year. So it looks like a Big Ten might make it if Ohio State continues to run the table, because that normally seems to be the 2-3 matchup if Alabama ends up being the number 1. But going out west to the Pac-12, probably the biggest Pac-12 matchup of the season, if you will. Oregon Ducks in the Autzen Zoo in Eugene, taking on Washington and winning at home in overtime against Jake Browning in Washington. Basically, all but ensures Oregon has a pretty clear path to the number 1 seed in the Pac-12 North. Dan, what do you think this means now for Washington, who is a number 7 team, now dropping and now basically having to hope that Oregon finds a way to lose?
Well, for Washington, this is definitely disappointing because, they lost that opening game against Auburn, and at first you think, well, that's a really good loss. It's a neutral site game all the way out in Atlanta, basically a home game for Auburn. But now Auburn's got 3 losses, so that loss doesn't look as good anymore. And now they lost to Oregon. So they're looking at maybe the Alamo Bowl possibly, which is definitely not the expectations they had at the beginning of the year. They were thinking playoffs, especially going into that tough out-of-conference game. They wanted to make a statement, and now with 2 losses, I think their whole season changes.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Washington now basically just hoping and praying they can find a bowl game, maybe even in New Year's 6 is on the bubble, if you will.
Yeah.
But now going to this week, a lot of other big matchups, especially one in the ACC. You have the Clemson Tigers taking on NC State, the Wolfpack, but they're doing it at home in their Death Valley. Clemson having their struggles, not beating teams or putting teams away as much as we've seen, and they are prone to lose to a team that isn't necessarily at their caliber. Do you think NC State is the team to upset Clemson?
I would not put my money at all on North Carolina State beating Clemson because, Clemson's proven to be big time the past 3 years. They've got Trevor Lawrence at the helm. He just ripped Wake Forest apart. The only really tight game in which Clemson has had in the ACC was when Trevor Lawrence went down against Syracuse and the backup had to go in. Essentially their third string quarterback because Kelly Bryant had transferred. They ended up winning that game at home. Honestly, NC State has a huge chance of doing something huge here because this is obviously their biggest game of the season, and if they win, they're in the driver's seat to win the ACC.
Yeah, and then going to another Big Ten matchup, you have the Michigan Wolverines, now number 6 in the nation, but they are taking on their state rival, Michigan State, who's now entered the top 25 rankings at the number 24 spot. Who comes out on top in this one?
I think Michigan comes out in a very close game. I've been very impressed by their defense. They've got one of the best defenses in the country. They ripped Wisconsin apart. Hornibrook, a guy that people started having confidence in, the QB for Wisconsin, was pretty much embarrassed by Michigan this past weekend. Michigan State's QB, in my opinion, is not as good as Hornibrook. The only advantage is that Michigan State's going to be playing at home. They've got a good crowd. It's a rivalry game. That's why I think it's going to be a close game. And, yeah.
It should be very interesting to see a lot of matchups, very key in the next couple weeks, and the College Football Playoff Committee meeting for the first time just 2 weeks away. But anyway, that's all the time we have for this edition of the College Football segment. More SportsZone coming to you after this.
And welcome back to SportsZone. This is our favorite segment, Thumbles, where we throw a thumbs up and a thumbs down to things in the world of sports and the world at large. So I'm going to focus my thumbs this time on U.S. soccer. We had 2 friendlies in the last week, and 1 loss to Colombia and 1 tied to Peru. So I'm going to throw a thumbs down to that. It seems like we're not making any progress since we didn't make the World Cup. Still haven't hired a permanent manager, which is completely ridiculous. It's been over a year. Can you imagine if a country like Brazil didn't make the World Cup and they didn't hire a manager for a year? There would be riots in the streets. but it doesn't seem like there's any sort of pushback to the fact that we haven't hired a permanent manager yet, and we're still calling up players like Michael Bradley, who's past his prime and who's shown that he's not good enough to play for the U.S. national team, yet we're still calling him up, and he showed versus Colombia his lackluster performance. So there are just a lot of things in U.S. soccer right now I don't understand. So I'm going to throw a thumbs down to that, but I'm going to throw a thumbs up to MLS because the regular season's winding down and playoffs are coming soon, which is going to be very exciting. My favorite team, the New York Red Bulls, are 1 point away from the top of the Supporters' Shield ranking, so it's going to be interesting to see that. But the MLS playoffs this year should be very interesting because it's really anyone's guess who's going to win it. Atlanta are obviously the best team, but also the Red Bulls in the East. DC United have been on a tear lately, coming from last place all the way to a playoff position, so they've been very interesting. So it's going to be very interesting how they perform in the playoffs with Wayne Rooney. And then the Western Conference is completely wide open. Any of the 6 teams who make it can truly win it. So that's going to be very interesting to see. I don't think I'm going to touch on anything else because I know that U.S. soccer does not get represented enough in this show, so I wanted to focus my thumbs on that. So I'll end it on that, and I'll throw it over to Dan.
So, going on about international soccer, Germany, for the first time in 18 years, have lost 2 consecutive friendly-style matches. We know it was against Netherlands and France. Both are good teams. But to lose 3-0 to the Netherlands, a team that didn't make the World Cup, is unacceptable. You expect better from Germany, a team that, is excellent basically year in and year out. Personally, I think they outplayed France and they got unlucky, so there was at least an improvement for that next game. But we'll see how they end up doing in the Euro Cup in a year and a half from now. Obviously, there's a lot of time for them to improve, but it looks like they're starting to roll in a lot of their young players and give them some opportunities to grow and become accustomed to playing on the national team. I'm going to give a thumbs up to the Miami Dolphins. They played without Ryan Tannehill, and Brock Osweiler replaced him. Yes, the same Brock Osweiler who was cut by the Browns out of all teams, the team that never finds a quarterback. Anyways, he was a huge reason for why they beat the Bears in overtime. He had 380 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have 2 picks, but what do you expect from him? They won, We're 4-2 now. It's a good time to be a Fins fan. I'm gonna give a thumbs down to that new NFL roughing the passer rule because once again, there was a huge factor again this past week. Kansas City in the 4th quarter had the chance to sack Tom Brady, and the player just let go because he thought Tom Brady had already thrown the ball and he didn't want to get called for roughing the passer. And they've been calling it all year for putting your body weight on the quarterback, this and that. And those 4 points ended up being crucial down the stretch. And in my opinion, is why the Kansas City Chiefs lost that game. And now it's going to be a really tight competition between the Patriots and the Chiefs to see who gets that top spot in the AFC. That's it for today from me.
All right, so my first thumbs up is going to be for the Jets because they won a game. Yay. They never win, so that's great. Also, a big thumbs up for Todd Gurley. I talked about him before, but he's such a good football player. He got me 30-something points in fantasy. He's fantastic. Another thumbs up going over to baseball for Manny Machado. He took a lot of heat for not hustling down the first baseline in Game 3, I believe. But last night, he actually won the game for the Dodgers with his base running. And a thumbs down to Christian Yelich because I feel like he's been a bit childish throughout the postseason. He's a fantastic baseball player, but I do feel as though he's been rather childish. A thumbs down to the Red Sox because I hate them. But hopefully the Astros can come back. They're a really good team. I think the Astros will come back. A thumbs up to the Brewers as a team for keeping the series competitive because I think a lot of people thought that there was no chance that they would beat the Dodgers. I still think they'll win the series. And then a thumbs down to the generator that is outside of Cassell and McDowell because it's still there, and it drives me crazy.
All right, bringing it home. I don't know what's going on with a generator. Have never seen this thing, but I see Facebook events and a bunch of other stuff. I can't even thumbs it. I don't even know what to say about it. It's just absolutely bizarre that I'm seeing Facebook events about like beat the generator. Anywho, thumbs up to the weather. Cody, I know you're out there. We're keeping that alive for you. I even got more people doing it. How does that make you feel, buddy? You're an inspiration to this show forever and always. We miss you. Come back soon. But thumbs up to the weather. It's beautiful out still, except way too windy for comfort. I'm going to thumbs down the AU women's soccer team today. I literally ran to do this show from that game. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's going to be 90 minutes. It's a 3 o'clock start. We'll be done by 5. I'll be able to come up, take my time. No, we score a goal with 8 minutes left. I'm like excited. This game's going to end in 90 minutes. No, we give up a response from Loyola with literally a minute later. It's like I couldn't even bask in the fact that we were in the lead. And we gave up a goal. And not only did we go 1 overtime, we went 2 and we tied. The worst team in the conference, we tied. So thumbs down to AU women's soccer for that. I'm going to thumbs up the New York Jets. We have won, not one, we've won 2 in a row, ladies and gentlemen. We have beaten the Indianapolis Colts again. I know it's starting to seem like the Indianapolis Colts are everybody else's Cleveland Browns, but hey, we have to have one team that we beat pretty regularly, and, that seems to be the only one we're doing it to. So thumbs up to Sam Darnold as well, putting up 42 points on offense. Not a big deal. So I'm pretty happy for that. Thumbs up to college hockey. It's back. We're in business. So let's go. I'm a Boston University fan, which is very taboo to say around American University, considering the Patriot League rival thing. But BU hockey at its finest. Go get it done. Be good this year. Please don't fall on your face. Albie, we're hoping you have a big year this year. Thumbs down to the Boston Red Sox, because why not? Boston needs a loser, and I'm throwing my weight behind it, which means the Red Sox are not going to win the World Series. You heard it here first. I'm also going to going back to the New York Jets. Thumbs down to the New York Jets. We still don't know how to lose. Why do we keep winning? Like, if we win this week against Minnesota, maybe you'll hear me a little bit more positive about the New York Jets. But no, we're going to lose to Minnesota by like 35 points. And we'll be like, we just wasted 2 wins for nothing. Anywho, thumbs up to the New York Rangers for beating the Colorado Avalanche last night. So I'm guessing we can only beat really good Western Conference teams, but we can't beat really bad Eastern Conference teams. That's going to be the year it's going to be. Thumbs up to Jamie Benn and Miles Wood absolutely throwing haymakers in a fight in New Jersey last night. Truly a beautiful fight between 2 skilled players. Honestly, didn't expect it. Thumbs up to Notre Dame. We are now number 4 in the United States of America. We are in the playoff picture. Now we just need to not lose. Like 12-0. We have a really weak schedule. 12-0. Come on. Ian Book, Brian Kelly. Get it done for us, will you? Thumbs down to Jake Elmsley because he sucks. That's just never going to die. I'll say that every week. And I'm going to keep commenting about how that's never going to die every week because I've seemed to do that every single week. But for everybody here, for Dan Roth, Jessica in the back, Aaron, Dan Orlich, I'm Ryan Siegel saying good night from SportsZone. Tune in next week.